Hey everyone, Bitcoin is about to lose another 50% in this bear market. And here is why. So, Bitcoin doesn't have any earnings, it doesn't have a way to measure the value other than really sentiment and a couple other things like the um, the mining costs, which definitely affect uh, whether people are willing to buy it or not, or sell it, or turn off their miners, turn them on again. But the main driver of what dictates Bitcoin's price action, meaning whether it's going up or going down, is sentiment. Um, Big news events, big catalysts, big headwinds and tailwinds are what move Bitcoin. And right now, we're definitely in a bear market that we've had every cycle with Bitcoin, where we have sustained downward price action for about a year after Bitcoin peaks. So, but we're still seeing a lot of psychological denial in people who are still bullish on Bitcoin, even though, and possibly from the top or from before that, right? So they may have bought somewhere in the beginning of the bull market, before the bull market, near the bottom, or they bought near the top, and they've just been holding. And you have to think of it from the perspective of a holder. So the holders are still in denial of this bear market. They're not willing to sell. They think it's going to come back and rally and go back up to 80K, 100K or something this year. And if you go back in the history of every bear market, or at least the last bear market and the one before that, we go through every single stage of the bear market psychology. So the bear market starts and the bull market ends when there is a euphoric top. So right around 120K in September and October of 2025, Bitcoin had people saying it's gonna go to 200K, it's gonna go to 300K, 400K, and people thinking that, they wish they had bought more and gone all in. And that's usually just, basically a sign that everyone thinks that they're a genius and they're all going to be rich at the same time. So that crowded sentiment, that crowded psychology is very indicative of euphoria. That's where it started. Okay, you can see the same thing in 2025. It's total bullshit that we topped on apathy. No, there was a lot of euphoria. People were up a lot. Everybody was in profit. Everybody thought they were smart. And we thought we're all going to go to 150K, 200K. Okay? Then you have complacency. Now, what is complacency if you don't know? Complacency is you're basically being lazy with your trading. You're not taking profits. You're complacent because you think it will continue to go up and it will go higher than the previous high. So think after October 6th, when Bitcoin pulled back a little bit, was coming back up to 114K in October, and that was complacency. Then you have anxiety, where the price goes down a bit and people are starting to get margin called. They may have longed near the top and they're down on their position and they're getting margin called, and they're still trying to buy the dip, right? They're trying to buy, but they're getting a little anxious, right? It's not panic, it's not fear, it's just anxiety. a little bit uneasy, where you're not as confident about the bull market as you once were. And then after anxiety, you have denial. So as Bitcoin broke under 100K, that was the anxious phase. And then we crashed pretty sharply. We rallied back up to 97K. That was the anxiety phase, where we're just, why am I getting margin calls? Why isn't this going up more? Why, like, where's the bull market, right? They still think it's a bull market. And then you get denial, where we crashed to 60K, but there's a lot of dip buying activity. People bought at 60K, rallied sharply, came back up to 70, back up to 80 in May of this year. And just a lot of denial, very little acceptance that we're in the middle of the bear market. Saying it's going to go to 1 million. There were people on TV like Eric Trump and Michael Saylor saying it's going to go to 1 million, $21 million a coin, literally on TV. So that was pure denial, where we think Bitcoin is great. It's a great investment. Just look how well it's done in the past. It's got to go back up, right? That's called denial. And then after denial, you have panic. But we haven't had a panic scare like how we did in 2021. In 2021, there was denial when Bitcoin came down from the all-time highs at 69K, around there, came back to 35, and then rallied and made a nice little sort of base from 35 to 48K. And it's not euphoric at 48K, but it's people believing again, and believing that they got a great entry, and that it's in an uptrend. And so that rally from 60 to 82 was the same exact sentiment as it was in 2022 when we rallied from 35 to 48. Okay, and then the next phase was panic. So we had a panic whenever Celsius halted withdrawals in May, I believe, of 2022, and Bitcoin dropped below that floor. We thought there was a floor at like 35K. And yeah, we haven't seen any sort of panic where people are literally panicking. I need to get out. Like, this thing is going down. This thing is collapsing. I mean, perhaps there was some slight panic with I don't even know what what it was. Maybe it was a little bit of MicroStrategy. But we haven't seen mass panic, because as soon as we wicked below 60K a couple times, there was just a lot of buy the dip mentality of this is a great thing, and we're right back into denial, where we think Bitcoin's this great thing, it has all this support, it's still a bull market, So the next phase is going to be panic. And what's going to cause that? Well, there's a couple of different things. I mean, I'm not here to tell you what it's going to be. I just know that there is going to be a panic. And, so in 2022, we had that panic in May, and then it continued into a full-on capitulation because the price went down lower. Alts capitulated more so than Bitcoin, but Bitcoin also sort of capitulated, where it hit about 17,000 in June of 2022. And this was still in the middle of the bear market, right? Because it rallied after that capitulation, where a lot of people sell, they get completely out of the market because they're They're afraid that everything's collapsing. You know, it's not just Celsius anymore, it's a contagion, right? So this sort of contagion is what makes people panic and capitulate, okay? And then we rallied from 17 to 20K, maybe 20, 21, 22K for a little while. And then FTX went under, and that capitulation, where people were very just out of the market, turned into a depression. So the anger phase was, well, I guess the anger phase was like after the capitulation to 17K. The anger phase was when they're kind of like pushing back up to 20K, People are very angry at these people. Why did all these influencers lie to us? Why did the government allow this to happen? Why didn't they regulate crypto and prevent this sort of crash? So again, we haven't seen any sentiment that's remotely close to that, where we're like, why'd the government allow this to happen? I mean, there's no anger at Trump. There's no anger at the regulators. There hasn't been a big, massive crash where there's a contagion and a spread of something so negative in Bitcoin. 60K was like fairly tame. There was people selling, but sentiment-wise, not that crazy. Just a little bit with a little bit of panic, I think, with MicroStrategy, because we see some of these Bitcoin treasury companies going under and losing all their shit, but nothing crazy. And yeah, so we haven't had this capitulation, and we still think 60K is a bottom, right? And it is just like 35K was a bottom. And yeah, so what are we gonna see, guys? We're gonna see probably some sort of contagion, whether it be with MicroStrategy, maybe the government does something like I would say the Clarity Act has a high probability of failing before the August recess, which is August 7th, and then they don't resume until September 14th. So that's going to fail, and it's going to disappoint a lot of Bitcoin investors that have been riding this wave up from 60K to 66 or whatever, 10%, like, a steady, slow climb off of this, fearful bottom. It's like a reflexive bounce more than a accumulated bottom. And once we have that capitulation, it's going to take us below 60K, right? You can imagine that if we go significantly below 60K, and I'm not talking 58 or 57, I'm talking below 55, let's say, okay, where we're significantly below 60K, there's no longer a support, right? The next support is down at 53,000 or something, maybe even lower. And basically lower prices bring lower prices because of how the exchanges and leverage works, right? There's a lot of leverage in the system. There's whenever there's a sharp decrease in price, cascading liquidations where people are forced to sell, right? We haven't seen this forced selling, right? MicroStrategy was forced to sell a little tiny bit, but it was nothing, right? It was just like a drop in the bucket. And yeah, we haven't seen this crazy forced liquidation that happens pretty much every bear market. So that's going to take us, that's going to make us panic for sure. And then, that was basically all I'm trying to say, is that the people actually still think it's a bull market, and it's July. Bear markets usually last a year. So if it lasts a year, it's gonna bottom out in October, and that'll be time to start looking at buying. It could even go longer. It's gone over 400 days before of a bear market in Bitcoin, and usually the very end is pretty violent, right? It'll be a violent crash, and then after that, when it's at the bottom, like we had the FTX in November, and then in December, that's when Bitcoin was just flatlining, going sideways at 16K. And a lot of people were saying it was dead and stuff. I was bullish at 16K. I bought Bitcoin at 16K. And, people are proclaiming it's dead and stuff. Right now, at 64 to 66K, nobody is saying that Bitcoin is dead. There's no anger, there's no capitulation. It's just very, very far off. And the influencers are alive and well, right? There's a lot of influencers that are just still very bullish on MicroStrategy, which doesn't have a business, and a very bad strategy for trading, So I want you to be a better trader and get rid of your emotions and acknowledge what's happening with Bitcoin, instead of being politically biased or technology biased, or just being married to Bitcoin because of your ideas of, it's going to solve the fiat problem, the inflation problem, the national debt, or some bullshit that's just not true. You got to wait until there's actually a bull market, right? In 2023, when Bitcoin had already recovered from the 20K and under level, and it was at 25K to 30K, and it was just going up and down between 25 and 30, that was a time to be accumulating, because there was an ETF coming, there was institutions coming, there was a forward-looking thing where you're saying, okay, in the future, there's going to be more demand coming to Bitcoin because of this thing. There's going to be money flowing into Bitcoin from these institutions, from retail traders, from 401k people, because of these ETFs, institutionalized, tax-advantaged accounts. The security of Wall Street, essentially holding your hand. So that was like a very obvious buying signal, and clearly the bottom was behind us. Right now it's unclear, right? Some people are calling bottom. Some people have some decent arguments, right? Some Z-scores, some 200 EMAs or whatever, some RSIs, a couple of indicators, but not all of them. And it's definitely not clear that there is a bottom yet. It hasn't been a year. It's only been, 10 months, 9 or 10 months. And that's what we're looking for. So wait, be patient, and stay short, because Bitcoin, when we had the denial in 2022, it was 35K, right? At the sort of bottom of the denial, it was around 34K. And the panic and capitulation, the panic led us under 30K. The capitulation led us to 17K, 17.5 or whatever. So that was a 30% drop from the denial So if we drop 30% from this denial, 50%, that's going to put us at 30K at a capitulation level, which is basically the bottom, you know. Like if you bought Bitcoin at the bottom of the capitulation at 17K, you're fine. I mean, it's like you could have gotten a little cheaper if you had waited, but when you look back at it, 17K was a very good time to buy, with all those forced liquidations, those forced selling. So I think 30K is where we're going with Bitcoin. Okay, let's put that on the record. And I don't see anybody saying that right now. I don't see it on X. You know, all the Bitcoiners just seem to think that the Clarity Act is gonna miraculously get voted on by 7 Democrats that that are clearly against Trump and clearly not gonna vote yes unless Trump basically makes all of his crypto activity illegal. So they're not gonna vote on it, or they're gonna vote no. And that's gonna be a brutal blow, right? Even if, so that's happening. The Clarity Act is not passing, at least in its current situation where we are now, right before the August recess. So if you like this video, let me know. I made one of these when we were at 105K or something last year. I was saying that Bitcoin's a snail and it's not going any higher. It's not going to 200K, and the bull market is basically over. And now I am saying that the bear market is not over. It is not yet time to accumulate, and calling the bottom right here is really premature and really wrong. You're just incorrect. Sorry to burst your bubble, you know. Just get smarter, right? Like, if you get attached emotionally to your investment, you're not a trader, you're not making money, you're just a fanboy. You're just a cultist fanboy, and you don't care about your money because you care about Bitcoin and you care about holding Bitcoin and supporting the network or something. But at the end of the day, you're probably just a trader. You're probably just trying to make some money. You're probably not using Bitcoin for anything besides trading and making fiat money so that you can buy something. So stop kidding yourself and pretending that there is a catalyst like the ETFs. There's no catalyst coming for Bitcoin right now. I'm not saying that it never will. I'll probably buy Bitcoin when it's, you know, October or 30K, you know. I'll probably buy it because I like to buy things when they're very depressed and low in sentiment. But yeah, we're not there right now. So get out of MicroStrategy. It's a lot easier. The reason I'm talking so much about Bitcoin as opposed to stocks or anything else is because trading Bitcoin is a lot easier than trading stocks, right? Trading stocks, it depends on so many different things. The earnings, the CEO, the employee, the products, the market, the Fed, the global economy, like all these different things really affect your stocks, and it's incredibly complex, and they have way more participants and way more things to base the price off of, as well as options and you know, so much, right? So stocks can be very difficult. It's not just a smooth ride, right? Like Nvidia had a 60% drawdown in 2022, but it was still a buy the whole time, right? But it can be very confusing with stocks. But Bitcoin is like highly cyclical, highly based on sentiment, and you just do the opposite of sentiment, right? So sentiment's in denial. We are about to panic. The fear has subsided, and we got August and September to go down before we can say, okay, maybe there's a bull market coming. And if that means that Bitcoin just goes sideways from here on out, and maybe I'm wrong, and that was a capitulation, and we did reach some depression, that's fine. It's probably not going to be much higher than it is right now, right? In October, Bitcoin will not be significantly higher than 66K. I'm making this right now, and there's no point in just FOMOing into it right now. So save your money, wait for lower prices, wait for October, wait for the cycle to be bullish again before you start buying, because then you won't experience a massive drawdown like how I did and many did in 2022. Okay, I've experienced this. I hope this is good for new people and people that have not learned their lesson. I'm not making any money off of this. It's just more for my own records, because I've been doing this since 2019, making videos about projecting Bitcoin, and pretty much every time I make one of these videos, it's been 100% correct. So I'm excited. I'm gonna make a bag on the way down. I'm already short, and yeah, see you guys.